The Lady R situation, of course, did you feel that any of the coverage of that was unfair?
I think that as a result of it, both countries have a much clearer understanding of what our strategic interests are, what our strategic pain points are, and how to manage them. My job is to represent the interests of the United States of America. It is South Africa's job to represent the interests of South Africa. The policy positions of South Africa and the United States as relates to Gaza are actually closer than most people believe. There has been a fair amount of concern in the U.S. Congress towards some foreign policy issues and stances of the government of South Africa.
Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX. And today I'm extremely excited and honored to be joined by the outgoing U.S. Ambassador to South Africa, Ambassador Reuben Brigety. Ambassador Professor, or is it Professor Ambassador?
I should ask the same of you, Doctor Podcaster or Podcaster Doctor.
Thank you so much for joining us, Ambassador. It's a great honor to have you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
What was the most rewarding part of your tenure?
Well, this has been an extraordinary time to be U.S. Ambassador to South Africa. There have been obviously historic developments here in South Africa with the formation of the government of national unity. It's also been an extraordinary time in the United States with President Biden's tenure. President Biden with such profound history with the development of modern South Africa, and also in the world with enormous changes, challenges, conflicts, Gaza, Ukraine, elsewhere in the world. And so that's all been highly consequential. All of it has impacted on the nature of this relationship. So I think I would say my proudest thing is that I am absolutely confident that as I prepare to depart South Africa, that I'm leaving this relationship stronger than when I found it. Our two countries are engaging and talking with each other in ways which, quite frankly, we just hadn't been doing for many years across all levels of government, up, down, left, right, center. It doesn't mean we always agree, but it does mean that we're always engaging, and that's a crucial importance. And so I feel very good about that.
What would you say was the biggest challenge?
You know, I sometimes joke that when I first arrived in South Africa, I still had hair on my head. And I am now bald.
Right.
And the reason I am now bald is that I spent my first year just sort of lighting my hair on fire, trying to help Washington understand that we need to, in many ways, rethink just how we are actively talking with our colleagues here in South Africa. So I think in many ways, for probably a good decade prior to that, I mean, we've just been kind of talking past each other. I think that in many ways, sort of official Washington still had a view of South Africa that was pretty much fossilized in the '94 democracy miracle, maybe up through the term of President Mbeki. We hadn't fully paid attention to the degree of, quite frankly, real level of anti-Americanism that had been happening here, particularly amongst some political parties. We just weren't paying attention to it. Notwithstanding the nature of the really quite significant assistance and partnership that the United States had continued to provide over many decades. And so I think many of those things, quite frankly, were brought into much sharper relief because of a series of geopolitical challenges. And so having them brought sharper into relief, helping both of our governments find each other in this beautiful South African phrase that I've learned and will take with me going forward, has been very important work, very useful work, and I think hopefully will leave a very strong foundation for the years ahead.
You come from an academic background.
Yes.
What was the transition from academia to high-level diplomacy like for you?
Well, you know, one of the values of having a doctorate and academic background, as I think you would attest, is that it helps you to ask the right questions. It really helps you to kind of cut through the noise and see what is at the essence of a thing, because that's what it means to earn a doctorate and to really delve into the substance of an issue. Yeah. But I will also say that before I became an academic, I was a naval officer, and I was trained at the United States Naval Academy. I spent 5 years on active duty following my graduation, and so that does two very important things. Three, really, I suppose. The first is that the Naval Academy is one of America's premier leadership institutions, along with our sister academies at West Point, the Air Force Academy, and others. And so that training and the very basic skills that you learn are simply scalable. I mean, what you learn leading a squad of 12 midshipmen or leading a brigade of 4,000 midshipmen, as I did when I was 21, is very helpful and preparatory to leading, for example, what is the largest U.S. mission in all of Africa and one of the largest in the world. We have 1,400 people working with our mission here across 4 different government agencies with 50 separate U.S. government offices in the mission. And so that's an immense leadership challenge in coordinating all of that. Again, you start from the very basics of leadership. The second thing is that it makes you very clear about who you work for. Apocryphally, when Henry Kissinger was Secretary of State, he would bring every new ambassador up to his office. He had one of those old school globes that kind of sat on the floor, and he would tell the newly appointed ambassador, "Show me your country." Inevitably, they would point to wherever they're going to be posted: Mexico, Vietnam, The Hague, wherever. And inevitably, Kissinger would always turn the globe back to North America, point to the United States, and say, "This is your country." So that you always remember, whose interest you're representing, and in best case, doing so in cooperation with the country to whom you're going to be represented. And then the final thing is, naval service is unique compared to the other militaries, because historically, when a ship goes out to sea, I mean, you're off on the horizon, gone. I mean, particularly in the age of sail. The captain of a vessel at sea was his closest thing to absolute authority as you would find on Earth. And so that's comes with an awesome responsibility to see the full picture of everything you're meant to represent, from the very technical things of setting sails to the leadership aspects of leading a crew to executing the mission you've been sent to do. And so in many respects, it is that sort of naval officer's mindset that in many ways has, from my foundational training, formed my own approach to diplomacy, representing American interests far from the flagpole, halfway around the world.
The Kissingerian anecdote is so interesting to me, and I wonder what it's like, because I'm sure you must actually develop quite an affinity with the country that you're working in, and it can maybe sometimes be quite hard to remember whose interests you're working for. Have you found that kind of tension in the work?
No. I have actually, I've spoken to probably 15 different universities since I've been here in South Africa. I have very comfortable on university campuses. I love engaging young people. And in one of these discussions, one young student asked me, "So, Ambassador, how do you balance representing the interests of the United States with the interests of South Africa?" And I said, "I don't. My job is to represent the interests of the United States of America. It is South Africa's job to represent the interests of South Africa. And in the best of circumstances, we are representing our interests together, and we find ways to advance them in ways to advance our mutual interest. That is the essence of diplomacy, and that's the whole point of foreign policy. Anticipating your interlocutor's reactions to your own decisions is the whole, and therefore making your decisions in ways that will advance your interests, anticipating what the other interlocutor is going to do. That's the whole point of the discipline."
It was amazing to me that your tenure has actually only been about just over 2 years. Is that right?
2.5 years, yes.
And I would venture to suggest it's been one of the most consequential tenures. The Lady R situation, of course, was a moment where particular media interest was focused around our relationship, around you. How do you reflect back on that, and is there any further insight you can give us into that moment from your perspective?
Sure. Well, our governments have agreed that the substance of that matter will remain in official diplomatic channels. It certainly was a pain point for both of our countries, but it evolved as a result of decisions that were taken, and it was my responsibility as the U.S. ambassador here to respond, in my judgment, consistent with what I understood the interests of not only our government to be, but also consistent with what I understood the nature of our engagement to be. I'm grateful that together we have moved through this incident. I think that as a result of it, both countries have a much clearer understanding of what our strategic interests are, what our strategic pain points are, and how to manage them. As you recall what I said, when I first got here, we simply were not effectively talking through such matters together. We now have those lines of communication open. They are productive, they are constructive, and I trust they will continue going forward.
Did you feel that any of the coverage of that was unfair?
Doesn't matter what I feel. The media covers what it does. What I certainly know is my job as a chief of mission is to do my level best to advance the interests of my country in partnership where possible with the interests of my host country. And in times where those two things conflict, to always be prepared to be open to work through them together.
I was just thinking as you were speaking that your experience as a naval officer actually probably would have come to bear on that situation.
Well, the situation was what it was.
It's been a fascinating time for the relationship. As I say, probably some of the most consequential 2 years. And one other area of disagreement I would expect is the Israel-Palestine situation. Of course, our government has taken a very strong stance on the situation in Gaza, and of course with the ICJ case has taken it to the international stage. What are your thoughts around obviously a country which is quite supportive of the Palestinian cause, and criticisms from our government of the US's role in that situation?
You know, I have said from the beginning of this conflict that, well, close to the beginning of the conflict anyway, that the policy positions of South Africa and the United States as relates to Gaza are actually closer than most people believe. Both countries have continually called for an immediate ceasefire. Both countries have called for immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, including American citizens who are being held hostage. Both countries have called for an immediate and full humanitarian access. And both countries have insisted that, notwithstanding this tragedy, it must lead to an irreversible process for the creation of a two-state solution where both Israelis and Palestinians can live within secure borders in their own states. We have taken different approaches to achieving those aims, but we are like-minded, actually, in those aims. The war in Gaza is an unbelievable tragedy that was precipitated on October 7th by an unprovoked attack by Hamas militants that killed well over 1,000 people and took many hundreds hostage in what was the deadliest day for world Jewry since the Holocaust. And the toll that the war has taken on the people of Gaza has been enormous. It has been heartbreaking, and we all want to see an end to the violence. So this is clearly one of the most difficult current issues in international affairs, and we are hopeful, prayerful, that it will lead to a resolution soon.
Perhaps one difference between South Africa and the US is the support for Israel. South Africa has been quite critical of what it calls US complicity in Israeli actions, and I fully hear you on October 7th. I think that was a heinous war crime. What do you say to the criticism that the US has given Israel too much latitude?
The United States and Israel are strong historic allies, and we will remain so. The state of Israel has been surrounded by enemies literally since its founding. multiple enemies have converged upon Israel multiple times to snuff out its existence. In 1967, again in 1973, and there have been multiple times where there have been multiple offers for peace to create a two-state solution that have been rejected by Palestinian interlocutors. Former President Bill Clinton has said really quite repeatedly of late that in 2000 they had a deal that, with Yasser on the table for Yasser Arafat that would have given the Palestinians 96% of the land they wanted with some additional land stops. How much different would the world be now if that deal had been taken? I'm not saying any of this to suggest that any of this to mitigate any of the harm that have done to civilians, but I am saying this to say that it is a much more complicated problem set. And the United States has, I should also say that support for Israel is in the U.S. government is broad-based across parties. And it is anticipated that the United States will continue to be supportive of the security of the state of Israel. President Biden also believes that security of the state of Israel in the long term necessitates the creation of a Palestinian state. In order for there to be a Palestinian state, there has to be an interlocutor that accepts the existence of the state of Israel. Hamas has said repeatedly its founding ideology is not a two-state solution. Its founding ideology is not trying to find a way to its founding ideology is the destruction of Israel. And so in order for there to be a two-state solution, there has to be a partner on both sides that is committed to that end.
Fam, I just wanted to interrupt this episode to let you know the 4 ways you can help SMWX. Way number 1, you can invite me to speak at your institution or company. Way number 2, you can advertise on this channel. Way number 3, you can become a member of this channel. The link to the membership is down below. And number 4, you can buy merch, that's books or hoodies. Now let's get back to the episode. All our contact details are in the description box below. As a scholar of international relations, I wonder from your unique vantage point, and I understand if you're not able to expand on global affairs because you have a particular role, but there's a really interesting conversation in the world at the moment about whether US power and influence is declining relatively, or whether that's overblown and the rise of BRICS, for example, is exaggerated. What do you think in this particular moment of global politics is the correct view?
Well, I think that as a scholar of international affairs, historically, there have always been shifts in power dynamics over time. This time is no different nor immune from that historical trend. I certainly know that it's the Biden administration's view that we have to figure out how to shore up the international order, the rules-based international order, and that all of us are better off with rules of the road that more or less all of us agree to and that more or less all of us observe. It is for that reason, for example, that the United States has publicly supported the creation of a permanent African seat of the UN Security Council. And also why we continue to be supportive of reform in the UN system, because the alternative of returning to some form of for lack of a better way of saying it, non-rules based system doesn't benefit anybody. And so the current system, clearly with the rise of other powers, with the democratization of information that's enabled by technology, presents some new challenges. And it's going to require some new thinking about how we're going to address it together.
Absolutely. The situation in South Africa and the US is fascinating this year because we have a rare coincidence of 2 elections at the same time and 2 quite important elections. Are you confident that we'll be able to continue this trajectory of increased dialogue and even cooperation, given that so much has changed in actually both countries.
Yes. Well, I certainly hope so. One thing that I am certain of is that the history of our two countries in recent decades has been that regardless of what has been happening in our respective national politics, that it is these people-to-people ties through academics, through artists, through businesses, through civil society organizations that have kept us engaged and kept us closely linked together. And so I suspect that will continue. In fact, one of the initiatives that we have taken during my tenure here has been an initiative that we call Atlanta Pambili.
Yes.
Which uses or envisions the use of the rich ecosystem in the U.S. city of Atlanta as an anchor point for everything positive between our two countries. Atlanta has enormous resources in everything we're trying to do together in healthcare, in job creation, in the creative industries, in logistics, in education. All in the context of a city that is the birthplace of the American Civil Rights Movement, with very strong ties to the anti-apartheid struggle, that is known as the Mecca of Black excellence in the United States of America in the context of a multiracial, multi-ethnic environment. And these are all things that bring great levels of affinity and possibility for South Africa and in the U.S.-South Africa relationship. So we wanted to demonstrate what this bilateral relationship could look like by highlighting this particular partnership as an example of what more we can do together. And so I'm confident of this. As I prepare to leave South Africa, we absolutely have set the groundwork and the framework for continued partnership between our governments, between non-government actors, between our cities, between businesses and civil society, and I feel very grateful to have been a part of that.
When I spent some time in the US, which I was mentioning to you before, and I was in Washington, D.C., I experienced the history of racial segregation there, and I thought, I know what this feels like. There's something similar, and our two countries have this epic history of struggles for racial justice.
Yes.
And that could form and perhaps has formed an important foundation for what unites the two countries too.
Yes. I think that's right. I think that the United States and South Africa share this painful history of struggle. We share the effort to continue to reimagine ourselves, notwithstanding that history. We have a great deal to learn from each other in that regard. During the Atlanta Pambili delegation, which just ended earlier this week, we were pleased to welcome the mayor of Atlanta, Andre Dickens, here, and he made a point of saying repeatedly, publicly, that the city of Atlanta and the Republic of South Africa are responsible for creating two of the great giants of justice in the world. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was literally incubated and raised in the community of Atlanta, and Nelson Mandela, who of course is one of the humanity's great icons for struggle for freedom and justice. And the fact that we can see each other through those shared histories does give us another set of points for us to understand each other better, and quite frankly, I hope serves as a point for continued comedy between our two nations.
AGOA is of course top of mind at the moment, and its renewal is something that many people in South Africa are agonizing over. What are your thoughts on the prospects? I'm sure you've done a lot of work to secure AGOA in your tenure, on the prospects of its renewal.
Well, it is the position of the Biden administration that AGOA should be renewed and that South Africa should be included in that renewal. As we sit here today on December 13th, 2024, just 48 hours ago, Republican Congressman John James from Michigan introduced a bill to reauthorize AGOA with enhancements to include extending it through the year 2027 and a number of other enhancements that will improve the program. And so those negotiations are literally on their way right now, and we will see if Congress is able to come to an agreement before the end of the Biden administration.
You mentioned earlier that the view in the US was perhaps still trapped in a certain era of South African history, the 94 era, the Mbeki presidency. What do you think has changed, and how have you tried to renew the view of South Africa outside of those older paradigms?
Sure. Well, let me be more precise. I think the view was trapped there when I started. I think that over the last 2 years or so, a number of things have changed to sharpen the mind, certainly of American policymakers and observers of South Africa. That things have changed really quite substantially. Some of that has had to do with the extent to which we are really paying attention to the view of many within the ANC towards the United States of America. Not all, but many, in ways that I think are not demonstrative of the fact pattern of how much the United States has demonstrated its legitimate and heartfelt and sincere partnership with the people of South Africa, which isn't to say that there aren't things to be critical of the United States, either as a society or our foreign policy. I mean, we critique ourselves in that regard. But it is to say that I think that there, until recently, has not been as much of a full appreciation in South Africa, certainly amongst some in some of the political environment here in South Africa, of the real strategic benefit of cooperation with the United States of America on economics, on healthcare, on global political issues that we can work on together. And so I think that has changed over the course of the last 2 years. There has been a fair amount of concern in the U.S. Congress towards some foreign policy issues and stances of the government of South Africa, which is frankly why there has been so much concern about whether or not South Africa will be included in AGOA renewal. Many of those discussions and concerns are being addressed from both sides. South Africa is resending to Washington Ibrahim Rasool to be ambassador to Washington again. He was ambassador during the Obama administration. He did a superb job then. I frankly personally think it is a masterstroke to send him back. And I think that he will be one of the best representatives that South Africa could have in Washington at this very critical time.
Are you personally looking forward to a bit of time to breathe? I have no doubt that you'll go on to even busier times in your life, but are you looking forward to a refrain?
It'll be nice to take a knee, as it were, for a little bit, take a breath. We will go back to Washington in January. President Trump will be inaugurated on January 20th. My wife has graciously given me the rest of January off.
Well negotiated.
I'll see, exactly. Yeah. I'll see if I can extend that for a couple of days.
Your negotiation skills are clearly unmatched.
You haven't met my wife.
Fair.
But we'll see. She's lovely and has been the backbone of my support during my time here, and I couldn't have been blessed with a better life partner. We've been married 21 years this year.
Wow.
And so we'll see. I honestly don't know what is next. This is sort of the kind of circle of life in these sorts of jobs.
Yeah.
But I'll take a breath. And one thing is for certain, I will always remain a friend of South Africa.
Hope so. However, one thing does remain to be verified, which is that you have championed your golfing exploits with Clement Manyathela, but yes. I'm afraid witnesses have not been identified to verify these claims.
Well, I said I golfed with him. I didn't say I was good. But my golf game has improved since I've been here in South Africa. I now have what I consider to be a non-embarrassing, enjoyable golf game.
In closing, what's the one thing that you think you'll remember and take from your time as ambassador here?
I'll give you two things. I have really come to embrace and understand more deeply the spirit of Ubuntu. I am because we are. I knew about it prior to coming, but we have run our mission here on the basis of what we call Ubuntu diplomacy, recognizing and uplifting all of our common humanity. I think it is one of South Africa's great gifts to the world, and I look forward to doing my level best to continue to embody it going forward. And then also, as I said, this beautiful idea of working to find each other. I think that is the work of all diplomats, those of us that officially hold the title and those of us that, by virtue of what we do in connecting people every day like you do, it's important that we work to find each other.
Ambassador Brigety, thank you for the honor of this interview, and we wish you all the best in your future endeavors.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching. Like, share, comment down below. Help us get to 200,000 subscribers and keep it locked on SMWX. Aye. Fam, you asked for some SMWX merch and we have delivered. I know you're always looking for ways to help support and grow this channel, so why don't you buy yourself an SMWX hoodie? Super comfy, super warm, and you can represent SMWX. You can check the link down below for how to buy your SMWX hoodie and help build and grow this channel so we can bring you more interviews, more analysis, and more educational insights.